Just have a special announcement for my listeners. First of all, I want to say thank you so much for listening. Started off as an experiment in August, but I've had about 2,000 listens of my podcasts, and I'm so grateful. I have a special request for my year-end episode 2020, which has been an incredibly interesting year. I plan to do an episode of listener feedback. So what I'd love for you to do is leave me a message, and the link is in the show note, about what you took away. What was one thing after listening to several episodes was the most impactful to you, that helped you in some way, or was an insight you hadn't thought about before? If you can do that, then I will be sharing some of those insights. You can see that link in show notes. Enjoy this episode. Welcome to the Navigating Disruption podcast. I'm your host, Shaquille Barmel. I'm the CEO of Ocean Blue Strategic and partner with the Summit Group. I'm a coach, consultant, and speaker, and I help leaders, entrepreneurs, and sales professionals make an impact through improved performance. In this podcast, I share insights and interviews with interesting leaders to define practical lessons that you can use to make an impact in the face of uncertainty. Francis Pan is a man of many cultures. He came to Vancouver from Hong Kong as a young child and went to a small private school in Chinatown and then eventually graduated from the University of British Columbia with an engineering degree. He traveled from Canadian forest to forest, maintaining and installing equipment for sawmills, a very traditional old economy industry, working with his hands. Once he completed his MBA, though, he moved to Asia, first in Japan, then Singapore, and then Hong Kong. And over the last 20 years, he's had a front row seat on disruption. As a senior leader with the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park, he now has a role in the discovery of the next wave of innovation, the next wave of technology across a number of fields. In this interview, he shares his experience and insights from this unique perspective. Hey, Francis, how are you doing?
Shaquille, very good. How are you?
Yeah, great. Good to see you. It's late in the evening here in Ottawa. Where are you?
I'm in Hong Kong.
Well, Francis, thank you. You are my first official international guest. And so, of course, we went to Ivey together. We met at Ivey in 1998. I feel like we might have met at the kind of mixer in Vancouver before we all went. You know, you, Tara, a few other people that we met together at that mixer. I wanted to get a little bit into your kind of history before Ivey. And did you actually, were you born in Canada or were you born elsewhere?
I was actually born in Hong Kong.
Okay.
And when I was 5, way before the immigration rush, our parents took my brother and I, and the 4 of us came to Vancouver to join my aunt and her side of the family. So a little bit of a family reunion, so to speak, with my grandparents as well. So I basically grew up in Vancouver.
So you grew up in Vancouver. So you came when you were 5 years old. I don't know what it was like for you. I came to Canada younger than that. I was basically 3. I do have memories of back home in East Africa. But I always felt like growing up that I was living in at least 2 different cultures, the culture at school and the culture at home. Did you have that same experience?
Yes, very much so. And I think, we're both from Vancouver. So, in the 70s and 80s, there's a lot of newcomers coming in. And there was actually a quite welcoming mix, I think, quite well. From my perspective, I went to very fond memories. I went to a very humble private school, my church's school. We were Chinese Catholic, so to speak, and we had a small little school down in Chinatown.
Okay.
Very small class. I think we graduated with a class of 16. The class before us was a class of 8. You can see these it's kind of Little House on the Prairie type of scenario.
So, at what point did you think that were you ever thinking that you'd go back to Southeast Asia, go back to Hong Kong, or was that ever a thought of yours as you were growing up?
Yeah, so absolutely, and because in the '80s, as all the immigrants started coming, but they're kind of more the kind of the incumbent, so to speak.
Yeah,
You got a lot of influence, right? Especially in the media and in the the products, or I guess the lifestyle.
yeah.
So there's a big curiosity with that
Mhm.
because I was you can say immigrated a little young
Mhm.
to have that type of social influence. So there's a big curiosity.
Okay. And so you went to university in Vancouver, UBC, right?
That's right. You're
Yeah.
right.
What did
I
you
did
study there?
engineering at UBC. I did
Engineering.
mechanical engineering.
Oh, okay. You're an engineer. You made a decision to go back to do your business degree. What were you doing in the years prior to making that decision, and what led you to decide to go back to business school?
Yeah, so I've halfway through, or maybe three-quarters way through engineering. The material was always very interesting to me. I loved the sciences as I grew up. Wasn't very good at math, terrible at computers, but thought, hey, let's figure how physically how things work, right? How things move around. I always had a curiosity that my dad was a ship mechanic, so to speak, in the North Shore in Vancouver. He actually before that, in the '60s, he traveled around the world on big ocean freighters
Wow.
as an engineer down at the bottom of in the engine room. So and he showed us videos of that, or he had actually videos back
Wow.
back in the
Back in
day. It was more Super 8 film,
yeah.
and yeah. So we were, and he always fixed all the mechanics around the house.
But
So
did that, do you think
my
that
brother and I
sparked
had
your
that.
interest? Did that spark your interest to become an engineer?
It must have. It
Yeah.
must have.
Yeah.
It's just working around the house, stuff like that. And he still does it. He's 80 plus now in Vancouver, and he still fixes the lawnmower. Goes around the yard three times a week, kind of thing. Halfway through around engineering, I just said, okay, this is interesting stuff, but how does the world really work in
Uh-huh.
terms of more, not business for the sake of business, but how do things, kind of how do people work with each other and
Yeah.
get things done, right?
Yeah.
Operations, things like that. And that's where I think I figured out, hey, an MBA is actually quite a common route.
Right.
And there's a whole side of those things. Plus, a lot of my friends in the university who actually was in the commerce department. But I still had a knack for engineering. And so I planned out and realized that, hey, there's certain schools out there that are pretty good at this craft, but you have to work. You
Yeah.
can't just go straight into it. You got to, and I've always had a working, kind of background, whether it's summer jobs or
Mhm.
however, and to kind of get into the nuts and bolts of things. So I spent 4 years, 2 years in Canada. Actually, again, new adventures. Left Vancouver, went to Prince George, entered forestry. Had
Yeah. A
a
very
somewhat of
BC thing to do. Very BC thing to do. Working
very
forestry.
BC. Yeah, but it was a very interesting role because, and when I reflect back, it's very lucky role in many
Mhm.
ways. I was a lone service engineer. The office was in Laval, Quebec. I had basically they gave me a car, and I worked with a salesman based out of Edmonton, and we basically did the circuit in Western Canada, driving uh, days at a time to visit forestry mills, and I would have to work graveyard shift
Oh,
because you can imagine the lumber mills are, sort of, the time is money.
yeah.
You're on the clock producing, and to service the machine, you have to shut it down. And maintenance was always midnight plus. So as we retrofitted our machinery, which was an aftermarket product, it was very much graveyard shift.
Mhm.
Design, measurements, all that stuff was graveyard shift. So yeah, so did that for 2 years, and saw an awesome part of Canada. Met some fantastic people. Roomed with a firefighter family
Okay.
in Prince George, and then just said, okay, hold on. I um, had this Asian upbringing, or at least influence from Hong Kong. Don't know much about it. Visited a few times during engineering, during the summers in engineering. Loved it. Saw a huge level of vibrancy. China was growing. Blah blah blah. People, my friends who went back after graduation were doing extremely well in their roles in business. What's that all about,
Hmm.
right? And pretty much did a 180 and left that role in Prince George, and in a couple of months was in amongst a concrete jungle instead of big evergreens in concrete jungle in Hong Kong, and trying to make sense of it all, as I was applying to Ivy eventually.
Okay. So when you went to Hong Kong, did you have a job already lined up, or
No, I didn't. No,
you
I didn't.
didn't?
I did have some leads,
Okay.
which people in Vancouver gave me, very nice of them. And but it ended up, and it was bustling. So you could find, I wasn't, it wasn't any manager role. It was very much, hitting the pavement kind of thing.
Yeah.
So it took some sales roles, ended up taking a project management role, really getting into a couple industries. One was building services,
Hmm.
because of the huge amount of properties,
Hmm.
literally skyscrapers here. So
Hmm.
work for Carrier in the air conditioning business.
Hmm.
And then in infrastructure development, work for a infrastructure development firm called Hopewell,
Hmm.
that was building a power plant in Indonesia.
Hmm.
And so got on some of that with the engineering type of mindset, got into some project work just
Hmm.
before Ivy came in.
Francis, can you tell me, I mean, you were basically came from Hong Kong as a child in Vancouver. You worked in Vancouver, you worked in Prince George, you were an engineer working with your hands in the woods, I guess. And you decide to go back to Hong Kong where you came from. How did it feel? Did you fit in? Did it feel right to go back to Hong Kong? Did you feel comfortable, or was it awkward?
Great question. Great question. It was reverse culture shock, like I did not expect, or
Hmm.
by any means. You thought you're growing up with that influence. You literally had friends who go back every year. That Trans-Pacific route was very popular. Um, and But when you're in this situation and you're not a tourist anymore, you're not just spending money, you're not consuming, you actually got to make do of a situation that you're literally your assumptions go out the door.
Hmm.
It's tough. It's soul searching. It's digging deep. It's a little bit of ego as well, because you just got there. You kind of told friends, hey, I'm gonna try this out for myself, and it was tough. But Hong Kong is a very international place. There is that connection that went reverse as well. We had so the UBC alumni was family, right?
Okay.
A lot of friends who, like I said, who moved that earlier, were building out great activities for the alumni, and that was the network that gelled everybody, that gave a commonality,
Hmm.
um, against a very different local scene that
Hmm.
really I had no idea about, even though you kind of look like everybody else.
Hmm. So this
That
this is what I
invisible
remember.
minority.
This is what I remember. I mean, because I was from Vancouver and I knew UBC, like UBC engineers had a certain way about them, right? Like it's probably like engineers in every university, but UBC engineers could conquer anything, right? Could solve anything. And there was maybe a bit of ego with being a UBC
Right.
engineer. So you went from this place, and then you go back to Hong Kong thinking you're going to conquer it, but you
Sure.
were hit in the face with a bit of a shock.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Uh,
By nature,
you're humble. You're a little humbler than most.
well,
Yeah.
right, a little more cautious, I guess.
Yeah.
Once you've been burned quite a few times.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, there is a bit of curiosity plus courage plus stupidity, you can say, and it's all good. But I think what you got to go in there with, or what I learned now is, it's always half full. I think some of the stuff you talk about with that growth mindset,
Yeah.
we didn't call it that back then, but that curiosity and that,
Yeah.
that seek for opportunity,
Yeah.
is very much here.
Yeah.
It's a very entrepreneurial environment here if you
Yeah.
look for it.
Yeah.
And that's for everybody, not just
Yeah.
for locals or immigrants or anything like
Well, I'd love to talk more about what you're doing now in Hong Kong, but before we go there, so you're in Hong Kong and you found a way to make it work in Hong Kong, but then you leave again. You
that.
leave
Right,
again
right,
to
right.
go back to go to business school.
I got accepted as I was just landing in Hong Kong.
Hmm.
But and smart on Ivy side, they said, look, you're not. We need you to work 1 more year. You're not quite ready to come to our school.
Okay.
You just, And then I said, great. I just got here. Thanks for accepting me. Now I can plan ahead, financially or otherwise and get the best of
Hmm.
what I can out of being in Hong Kong. Right?
So
Not
them
just
actually saying no, not yet, was actually good for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. I just got to Hong Kong
Yeah.
and to switch back in a few months. I don't think it went the full distance. Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So then you went back, you did your MBA. And so when you finished your MBA, was there a decision point about whether you stay in Canada to go back, or how did that transpire?
Yeah. You know what? Sometimes you just got to roll with it. And this worked out very well for me. What happened was I applied to an exchange program at Ivey. So it was something I really wanted to do while I was back in school. I didn't get to do that in the undergrad. And, Ivey had a great exchange program, and I wanted to come back to Asia, go to Japan. And because I couldn't afford it when I was living here previously, and heard great things about it. A guy from Dell came and did a talk. I caught up with him, connected. Next thing you know, he had a head count. And by March 2000, I signed on and just said, hey, let's give Japan a try. And then by the time we graduated, came back in June, the bubble burst, and the tech bubble burst, as you know, and I was lucky to have a job. And then within 6 months, and I was working on Dell.com stuff, so it was very much front and center of the bust. And within 6 months, I was the one person left in the department.
In Japan.
So in Japan, yeah. Various people went to various people left. But yeah, that was hugely, I think, disruptive. As we leave Ivey thinking, we can rule the world, right? At least, I guess naively thought. And what happened was that wasn't the case. But at the same time, I think the opportunities that present itself, really you just got to take it on, and no matter how the external situation was, really dig deep and work it through. And I think Ivey with that.
Yeah. So then you ended up, I'm sure you had a number of different opportunities, but then you ended up in Hong Kong. What took you to Hong Kong?
Yeah. So long story short, I spent 2 years in Japan. Met my wife, now back then girlfriend, in Japan. She was an expat in Japan from a Hong Kong company. And then, after her years, a couple of years later, she moved back. I was looking for an opportunity to, join her. It was a little tough. The travels weren't as convenient as now. It's really hard to do long distance from Japan to anywhere else, really. Closest opportunity I had to what I was doing was in Singapore. So I was in Singapore for 3 years. She was back in Hong Kong. And we did long distance for 3 years as, we were engaged, married, and then had our first kid. First kid said, okay, that's enough of that. And pretty much packed it up from Singapore and then came back here.
What was it like living in Singapore? I mean, I've never been, but I remember the cases we did at business school. There was a case on Singapore that we did.
Yes.
And it basically described the country as being run like a company. Is that really the case?
Quite honestly, I couldn't really get into Singapore as much as I wanted to. Half of the reason was half the time I wasn't there. So with Dell in Singapore, I was working regionally, and half my time I was in the factory in Penang, in Malaysia, and half the time I was in Xiamen in China, and then really establishing the online operations, or at least the online marketing for that. So, and then, the rest of the time I was in regional headquarters, so to speak, in Singapore, working with management. So I never really got into it as much, but in terms of, the lifestyle, very easy, very, very comfortable. everything you hear about, how well people are taken care of, the education system, the medicals, all that is very true. Things just work. I guess as someone with a Hong Kong background, it is somewhat different. So, and me not being there all the time, I just, we did have a discussion between my wife and I, hey, is Singapore the place or Hong Kong's the place? Ended up, family always win, which it should, I think, and that was Hong Kong.
Yeah.
But in terms of my career, like tech, regional tech or tech management, tech kind of senior management, it's definitely Singapore over Hong Kong in terms of the way at least multinationals are set up. And that's it is what it is. So
so tell me what you're doing right now in Hong Kong. What's the organization you're with? What's your role? What are you doing?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for that. I'm with the Hong Kong Science and Technology Park. And it's very much a charged up ecosystem to do deep tech innovation, development and deployment in Hong Kong, but really, beyond Hong Kong and for Asia. And actually, we have partnerships around the world. I do market development for our corporate innovation program. And we work with great partners around. I work with a lot of the Canadian universities as well. So, accelerators like Velocity at Waterloo, Hatch at UBC, the whole Creative Destruction Lab network. What we do is we have about 13,000 people here in this ecosystem, all really charged to do what we call translational research or innovation that comes from IP, from the universities, from academia, and really taking it into some kind of development for commercialization and deployment. And we focus really around, AI, robotics, health tech, which is really getting a lot of good IP here, and a lot of financial opportunities as well in that global finance network. Smart cities tech, because us being a very urban jungle, and then of course fintech. So it's an amazing opportunity. I'm very honored and privileged because behind or with us are these amazing entrepreneurs. Right? It's on tech entrepreneurism, like I said, versus my time in Singapore. It's pretty much stacked up against you here.
Really?
Because everything is so developed. The industries are so developed. It's matured through the growth phases of the 70s and 80s, 90s. Really accelerating the management practices and growing China. Especially just north of here. A lot of that expertise was developed from Hong Kong management. And so things are very well developed. And I guess about 20 years ago, the government and some business leaders said, okay, we gotta get to the next stage of growth, and places like the science park was developed. Since then it's really, I think, from an entrepreneurial spirit, really taking on in the tech side, because there is that heavy IP, that a lot of expertise that needs to be first nurtured, and then you can take it into kind of innovation development. So it's hyper stimulating working with PhDs here. A lot of thought leaders, a lot of people that really gave up their careers in some ways, or extended their careers from like I said, those set industries, seeing opportunity to close the gap or what have you, and then really kind of find a way to develop it with our infrastructure here.
So
and with our programs.
You're around innovation like all the time. That's basically your world.
Yes.
Yeah. So it's kind of like the cutting edge. You talked about AI. You talked about clean tech. I guess there's health tech, fintech. This is the stuff where everything's happening. And I'm just wondering that, given the fact that we're in pandemic and COVID, and there's been so much more attention on these new technologies, and these things were always there, but it seems like the attention on them is amplified.
Yes.
Do you see that as well on your side?
Absolutely. So, the various ecosystems around here have basically taken the opportunity or sees the opportunity to help. And ourselves, we've collated about 30 plus solutions that we've shared with the community. These are everything from nanotech, from coatings to air filtration to more sanitization products that really is helping out. And these gone international, which really kind of tells the Hong Kong story as well. So yeah, definitely. Like you said, things were already in development, and the situation, unfortunately, really gave these I guess these opportunities and more exposure and an opportunity to go forward. So yeah, and I think I see that in Canada as well, from our partnerships, and I think everybody's trying to do their part. But yes, we had some momentum, coming into this.
So I know from going back and forth and preparing for this conversation that this is actually a pretty big time in your annual cycle. There's some competitions going on. Can you tell us a bit about what's going on right now, or what's been going on?
You bet. It's never a dull moment here.
Yeah.
But yes, we are coming up on our annual flagship event, which is before COVID, a physical elevator pitch, something business schools would love, and we actually work with a lot of business schools. But basically, we used when we'll get back to it after COVID's, we can handle on it. Is we have a 118-story building, our tallest building, the International Commerce Center in Hong Kong, and we take basically 100 plus entrepreneurs from around the world, and they get to pitch in the elevator over 60 seconds to an investor, a VC, what have you, sitting with them in this elevator for this elevator ride in 60 seconds. And we cycle through 100 plus of them over a day.
Hang on. I gotta picture this. So it's really an elevator pitch. So you've got a really tall building with an elevator that takes 60 seconds to get from the bottom to the top, and you bring in 100 innovators from all over the world, and you basically say, go in the elevator, pitch your idea. If you sell the idea by the time you get to the top, you get money. Is that how it works?
Yes.
Wow.
That's how it works. We have videos on YouTube. You can go check it out. It's called EPIC, EPIC, elevator pitch competition. And last year, Canadian company have done quite well. Last year, in fact, Eco Packers, who comes from UT, did quite well. They came up with one of the top prizes, and it's cash prize. This year, we've upped our purse to 200 grand US. And the top pitch gets 100 grand.
Yeah. Okay. So now I want to ask you, because from the perspective you have, you obviously see a lot of interesting ideas. What are the characteristics of the innovators that actually win, that actually are successful getting the funding when they get to the top of the elevator? What are some of the characteristics?
Well, I think you got to really be able to present yourself in a very, concrete and concise and valuable way. Now that's, a no kidding comment, but I think the other thing is we do look for, because we're a science park, we do look for tech innovations. So it's something that has, you can say, longevity or really a disruptive nature to, certain pain points or challenges that we see that definitely that we can take into Hong Kong for the world, right? So that's some of the basic criteria. But you get some amazing, and it's not just set like the one I talked about. The Canadian company had very much we're on its way to develop that solution. But we take early stage ideas as well, and you never know what comes through. It's amazing.
So it's brilliant. So you're basically scanning the world to find the most innovative ideas anywhere in the world, to bring them to Hong Kong, to get investment in Hong Kong, to bring them to life, to make them successful, to take them back out into the world. So you're basically intellectual importers.
You know what? And that's what Hong Kong is. Hong Kong's always been a trading port, right? Whether it's when it was founded, on textiles, toys, electronics, right? That's the whole evolution of Hong Kong, right? And then it was property tech, global finance, And now we're, really want to take that same spirit, that same energy, that same resources, infrastructure, and direct it, or we have already directed to innovation.
Mm.
Um, and or take products, tech solutions for innovation. And I guess the even bigger opportunity now is that Hong Kong is, in economically very early stages still, but part of this, what we call Greater Bay Area,
Mm-hmm.
this super cluster of cities
Mm-hmm.
that is double the size of Canada in terms of population, right? 70
Wow.
million people. And so far with the manufacturing centers north of here, with other tech development areas, infrastructure, it's got a GDP that rivals Tokyo Bay, which is the largest city cluster economic zone in the world right now, right?
Wow.
So, and that's just starting because the way I say it's starting is because there is so much, I guess, output that still needs to be seized from a kind of GDP per capita perspective.
Mm-hmm.
That's just north of here or even
Mm-hmm.
here. But here we definitely can see how we can turn the direction a bit more and give that kind of give it a little push along the way, or push
Mm-hmm.
it bigger along the way.
Mm-hmm. Wow, I can see why you're there. That sounds pretty exciting. You're on the cusp and you're witnessing disruption from its kind of earliest kernel stage to it actually happening. That's where you are right now.
Yes, and thank you for that. I mean, it's that's you and me looking at it from a growth mindset perspective. It is challenging along the way.
Yeah.
It's never a dull day,
Yeah.
because when you're at the beginning of the curve, you don't know how it's going to ramp up,
Yeah.
and you don't know how it's ramp up because everybody's an expert, right? Everybody is so passionate about it, and they want to see it go a certain way. And that formation before you take that steep ramp up the S curve, takes things to line up, and a lot of the times, it's not in your control,
Mm-hmm.
right? There's multiple partners, multiple situations, multiple things. COVID
Yeah.
that comes knocking on the door, right? And you just gotta have the wherewithal to navigate with that, right?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
through it.
So, as we bring our conversation to a close here, given what you were seeing in this heart of innovation, do you have a sense of what you think are the really important leadership traits, leadership behaviors that are going to be critical in the next 10, 15 years, particularly from an innovation standpoint?
Yeah, absolutely. I think from a leadership perspective is to, I think the first thing is to never give up.
Mm-hmm.
Whether you're the entrepreneur or a body like us that is promoting entrepreneurism, you can't give up. You
Mm-hmm.
gotta see the forest through the trees.
Mm-hmm.
And it's easy for me to say, but it's actually very tough, especially when there's real financial
Mm-hmm.
situations that people have to navigate, etc.
Mm-hmm.
Because our entrepreneurs actually, as you develop deeper tech, entrepreneurs are people who, like, they're not fresh grads. A lot of them are well experienced, senior leadership in corporations that finding new passion in certain ways.
Mm-hmm.
Tech fellow engineers, who have lots of experience. So they have, everybody's got family and things like that to work with it as well.
Right, right,
So
right.
never give up is one. I think the other one is you got to be able to communicate very well in your what you're trying to bring to the market, what you're trying to do. And communication is not just about one way talking, but really able to sense the environment, sense the
Mm-hmm.
opportunity, and really get to know where your luck can happen. Put yourself in the path of luck is I guess something I've still trying to figure out how to do.
Yeah.
But because so much externality that's affects things that in that early stage, you really got to have a pulse on the ground.
Yeah.
Get that pulse, yeah.
So
And then
you're adding a dimension to communication, which is not something we typically talk about. We typically talk about, verbal communication, written communication, presenting in front of a room. You're talking about something that's even different now. It's a kind of communication that's sensing, picking up on signals in the environment, in the people that you're dealing with, and
Yep.
using those signals to actually make decisions.
Yep. Yep. And
Kind of like
here's
ESP. It's like an extrasensory kind of
well,
perception.
I think it's that everything, there's a lot of talk about empathy, deep empathy, all that stuff. That's all coming into play. I think, because when you're communicating, it's beyond that elevator pitch now, right?
Right.
You got a lot more than 60 seconds. And so I think a lot of time is you spend more time actually sensing and listening and absorbing and finding out before, you can, kind of quote unquote get on stage with that financier, with that partner, with that whatever, to make that proposition or to connect the dots. There's a lot of preparation that needs to happen. I mean, some people do it quite well, quite talented. They naturally have a need to connect the dots. Other people are very, I guess, in a lot of cases, what we see here is very passionate about their IP, right?
They're focused on the idea. They're focused on the idea, not necessarily the application.
Or even if they do have the application, this is going to save the world, right? Well, it won't tell you until you can work with others to help you along that path, right? Because we're talking things, even though things aren't as I still see things very global.
Yeah.
Even though politically or the media doesn't, it's kind of got a little local. That you can take solutions and really affect places more than just within your local vicinity.
Right.
So that ability to really broaden that horizon is there, but you got to be able to have that multicultural empathy, say, and we're not talking just social culture. We're talking, tech culture. We're talking economic culture. All these different influences that you got to kind of figure out as you go to market.
Wow. I mean, that sounds pretty complicated, but in essence, what I'm hearing you say is that you have people who have a great idea, but the idea, and even having the idea fully worked out and technically sound, is not enough to really be successful. You need the idea, you need it all technically sound, and then you need these superpowers, which are all around empathy, connection, reading signals, understanding economies, understanding pockets, understanding different cultures around the world. And so do you feel confident? Do you feel that there are people out there that will rise to that challenge and we will see the innovation come to market?
Absolutely. And we do. I think the it's a being better versus being best mindset, right? Because as long as you're thinking you're trying to be better every day, you trying to figure out that now you'll see how to improve it and you'll work. And as long as you put that to practice, you always get good. At least what I've seen, whether it's here, whether it's Canada, whether it's Singapore or Japan, people who ever put their mind to practice at something and you keep plugging away at it, you get good, right? And I think that's probably the best thing, to put yourself in that path of luck. And whereas when you're trying to be best, you're not going up against yourself. You're going up against some external, predetermined by someone else's values and goals. And yes, you might hit it or you might be the best, but then I think your best doesn't come out by looking at another external a benchmark or a target. I think.
Francis, can I see if I'm getting it by saying it another way? Is it something like if you view success as a destination, you will never achieve it, but if you view success as a series of connected activities from day to day, that's when you start actually being successful. Is believing that you'll actually never get there, but it's steps you take every single day to be better than you were the day before.
Absolutely.
Wow. I think that's a pretty wise words to finish off on. Francis, if people want to learn more about what you're doing, where should they look?
They can come to our website, www.hkstp.org. right?
AKS.
Or they can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn.
You're on
Happy to connect with our classmates or people on your podcast. Yeah, Francis PUN.
Hey, Francis, thank you for spending the time with me. Really, really enjoyed it. I'm not going to be able to go to sleep now. It's late here, but you got me so excited about this elevator ride that I'll be dreaming about it. But thank you so much. Have a great day, and look forward to talking to you again.
Shaquille, thank you very much. It's been fantastic talking to you. Have a good day.
Well, that conversation was worth staying up late for. I enjoyed talking to Francis in Hong Kong. A few things I took away from that interview. The first was how he expected to be able to be successful in Hong Kong, because despite growing up in Canada, he grew up with a Chinese culture around him. And he had friends from Hong Kong. And so he thought he'd go back to Hong Kong and he'd knock it out of the park right away because he knew the culture. He realized pretty quickly that he didn't know enough. And he got his experiences, he got curious, and he just rolled up his sleeves and got into the culture. And it made me think about how many times I go into a new experience thinking that I know what needs to be done, and how often you realize that you actually didn't know enough. He also talked about the importance in tenacity and perseverance for entrepreneurs and innovators in the future, that as times get more challenging, there's going to be a premium for individuals, creative thinkers that have the tenacity to test, to learn, to fail, to get up and try again. I think it's always been important, but he's saying it's even more important in the future. He talked about this extrasensory capability that will be important in the future. That is not just relying on the communication that you can see and hear, but it's like communications that you can sense. Picking up signals from the market, the economy, from consumers, from other people, and trying to use that information to make your ideas better and to increase the likelihood of success. And the last thing he talked about I thought was really interesting was this pursuit of being better and not the pursuit of being best. To focus on your own ability to be better than you were the day before, as opposed to being the best person in a market or in an industry. That being better will actually get you further than trying to be the best. Hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Have a great day. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate, review, or share it. I want to say thank you to one of my favorite bands, Late Night Conversations, for sharing their song Chaos with me and letting me use it in this episode. You can learn more about them on Instagram at LNC Connected. And here's more of their song Chaos to take you out.
Far behind my eyes, mediation, suffocation, it'll break me. Information in the skies. But when your eyes finally found mine, you were there, but I'm defined by the chaos in my mind. I believe what I perceive is a weave tearing at the seams, and I wonder what's behind. And my ears are bleeding, and the reason is in the logic of the season, taking the pleasing from my soul and